Yeah.
This. Hello, everybody, and welcome to PGS Tracks. I'm your host, Artman. Of course, my co-host here, Julian, is with us tonight. Julian, how are you tonight?
I'm doing super, RM. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, and of course, you and I watched the episode 4, No Win Scenario, the other night, and it was so incredible, Julian. What a great episode. And of course, we've just been getting episodes that are just getting better and better and better as the season goes on. Um, I know the episode started with a flashback where Picard is in a bar, I guess somewhere near where the recruits are. And it's such a pleasure to see these cadets come up to Picard and be excited about meeting him. What did you think about that?
Um, that it's to it's to be expected with a VIP like Picard. It's cool to see them having that respect and being excited to meet him and talk to him, as opposed to 2 seasons ago where he went into Starfleet to talk to them and people didn't even know who he was. So that was refreshing in one respect. Um, but yes, it was nice to also be able to open up the show, the episode like that, and use it as a device to tie back into the overall story. It was really creative, I thought.
Yeah, it really was. And, I liked seeing situations like that. I love seeing where, other people who are really excited to see the captain, finally get a chance to see him. And, it is also very interesting that um, uh, it was also cool at the same time to see how the ship itself was still going through this nebula or whatever this biological nebula, if you will, and getting banged around. They're taking hits, they're taking blows, and we still don't know. We don't really know why they got pulled into this nebula, right, Julian?
Um, there was a gravitational, there was something at the center of the nebula that was exerting a pull. And the fact that they had to get in there to escape in the first place from Vatic is kind of, that's the reason I saw that they were in there. There was nowhere else for them to go but into the nebula in the first place. And they'd become aware of some strange anomalous readings going on in the nebula itself, or what they take to be a nebula anyway. And so once their power is gone, their warp is gone, their power is out, sabotaged by the changelings, as we saw in the previous episode. So yeah, the gravity's going to do what gravity's going to do, and they're falling towards it.
Okay. And I thought maybe what was also happening was that whatever power they had, because they kept saying that, I don't know whether it was the nebula was siphoning power from the ship, or they were kind of power was just leaving the ship, that maybe the nebula might have even been taking some of the power from the ship. I don't know. I don't really, I'm not sure if that's the case, but I almost wondered if that was kind of what was going on too. So it was very interesting to see that, there was essentially these bioelectrical waves that the crew were describing that was happening. And we also saw some very interesting scenes with Riker where he talks, and of course, the previous episode, which was, I believe, 17 seconds, might have been about, I hope I'm saying that right, might have been about how Riker, hadn't had this devastating thing happen to him. But it seems like he hasn't been able to overcome one of the most devastating things in his life. And he tells Jean-Luc, you got to do something about what's going on. You can't just kind of like pass this by and pretend like this isn't happening to you. Do you think if Riker wasn't there, that Jean-Luc wouldn't have approached his own son?
I don't know. I don't have enough of a read on that. at this moment. I mean, I think either, if he's faced with the fact that, they're running out of time, no matter who gave him that message, he probably would have come around to the fact that he needs to go talk with Jack, because he obviously has a lot of questions on his mind about it, and that need resolving, and I think it's just the time frame, the timetable that they have, kind of forced that on him, and it was a good way to have the two of them, Riker and Picard, make up, about what happened on the bridge. It gives us, it's a very compact and efficient scene. It lets us know exactly what is eating Riker and why he is behaving the way he is, and also spurs Picard to have to go, talk to Jack now instead of later. So I think, hits everything right there in that one scene. Very efficient.
Yeah, it certainly does. And, I think it was wonderful to see that, or at least I'm not going to necessarily be able to go in complete chronological order, but just the fact that he was able to kind of go and convince him to go to the holodeck. And then there was a discussion about, why the holodeck and how it's needed for crew morale. It certainly is great to know it's like powered separately, so it doesn't interfere with any of the other power on the ship, but it's absolutely essential for the ship. And it's kind of nice to see that they have sort of like this Picard and Son talk, which was very interesting to see. But during their conversation, Julian, and I'm sure you recall in the show, while they're kind of sharing these special moments together, they are interrupted at some point by the captain, who is incredibly salty towards Riker towards Picard as he's trying to share things with his son, and he just can't help himself. It's almost as if he has to get this information out, and he cannot stop himself from saying what he wants to say. Was it the wrong time, Julian, or was it just the way it goes? What do you think?
No, he realizes that they don't have an awful lot of time. He probably never, ever in his life, we find out from him in this scene after Seven comes to him and says, "Look, we've got a changeling, and I don't know anything about him, and we got to figure out how to find it." So she does have a conversation with him. When he's done talking with her, yes, he goes there into the holodeck and lets us know exactly what his beef is. We find out that he was on board the Constance at the Battle for 359, and that he was one of a handful of survivors from that ship, and he's eaten up with survivor's guilt. He's eaten up with anger at Picard, who, as far as he's concerned, is responsible for it. Never thought he'd be face to face with Picard, aka Locutus of Borg, and so yeah, he had to get that off of his chest, and yes, probably it was in part because of the drugs that were coursing through him to help him with his healing, but it was a good scene. It was a really good scene. And yeah.
Yeah, it was spectacular and certainly grabbed my attention. And, I think it's one of those scenes that everybody will remember forever, Julian. I know Robert had him on his show last night where he was talking about the scene, and it's just been such a sensation. And, I had been speaking to you, Julian, we've been talking about the show, obviously, because we've been watching it and then reviewing the show afterwards, and how I am studying, just really feeling very differently about Shaw. through all of this and these experiences that he's been having, and how it's really changed him. It never left him. It's like this thing is, it's a fresh wound, Julian. It's a fresh
Yes.
wound. I mean, this keeps him up at night. I think, and even I was touched by how he mentioned that this crew member, there was 50 of them or how many ever there were, and the crew member pointed to him and he was number 10. And and he was ordered to get onto the life ship preserver or whatever it was, but
The life pod, yeah.
quite profound hearing him talk about this, because he realizes that in the blink of an eye, he could have been assimilated or whatever it was, but it certainly was something that changed his life forever, and he hasn't been the same since. And now he's face to face with a person who's so directly, two people who are kind of involved in that whole thing. But I couldn't ignore the notion that he in this situation just had to confront Jean-Luc at this point. And I think what's also very interesting about all this is that while this is going on, the crew of the Shrike, if I'm saying that correctly, suddenly decide that they're not going to engage with the ship anymore. At least it seemed like the order was given to Vadic to continue to engage, but then it seems like she suddenly disengages. What do you think about this?
Well, so she could not follow them any further because of the gravitational pull, and her portal weapon relies or works with gravity, and she surmised that if they took that portal weapon into the gravity well, it was probably not going to be well for them. So she said, no, we're not going to do that. And whatever handler she's dealing with, which was quite an interesting mode of communication, cutting off her hand, letting us know that she may be some sort of a changeling herself, and communicating with this, spectral face in the air type of thing made up of the material from her hand. Very unnerving. And it orders her to go in after them, and to get rid of the portal weapon so that they can do it. It's the only way they can. So they do re-engage and go back into the nebula after them. But they've lost a whole bunch of time now because of it. So
absolutely. I mean, it seems like they've been riding, the ship hard, and now all of a sudden they're backing off. And it feels very awkward and odd and jarring, and as if that wasn't part of the plan. So it is somewhat confusing in a sense, but even she was shaken when whatever this person was telling her that she and the entire crew and are all expendable, that they don't matter, was actually quite terrifying.
mm-hmm.
When you think about it. But Riker, in the meantime, after having spoken to Picard, I noticed that he is thinking that he has to leave this message for Deanna, and he has difficulty doing this, making this recording. And I think it's very interesting. He feels as if at least for me, the interpretation is that he feels as if he's not able to communicate what he wants to say to her, because he hasn't actually gotten past the stumbling block that he had the last time he saw her. What do you think about that, Julian? At least in this part of the episode.
Well, it really gives us an insight into the pain that he's feeling. He's based on what he told Picard earlier about how the death of their son has really just eaten at him, that he is feeling really rather hopeless and has no faith in some sort of any type of afterlife, religious, whatever. He's been from one end of the galaxy to the other, he says, and I haven't seen anything that convinces me that one view is true over the other. and it's leaving him quite. He's feeling dead inside, and the fact that he can't even, put together a message to either say I'm sorry or I'll miss you or anything like that. Is just speaking to the chaos that he's feeling in his heart about the whole situation. So yeah, it's kind of taking him out of the scenario. That he is in the no-win scenario. He's truly living it right now, trying to deal with that. I know that there's things. A lot of people have problems with the Star Trek 2009, the J.J. Abrams movie, but one of the things that I really appreciated about that movie was when Spock articulates what is so important about the Kobayashi Maru, training, the no-win scenario, and it is to realize that at some point as a Starfleet officer, you may be put in a situation where you have no way out and death is probably imminent, but you have to maintain your composure and your status as the officer to present your best face to your crew, and continue doing what you need to do till the end, no matter what. And Riker's having a hard time with that right now. I think all of them really are.
Yeah, and it was interesting how Riker spoke to Seven and told her, I know you have this bombshell of information about this saboteur, but you've got to keep it under wraps. You can't tell anybody about this. This is going to really affect the morale of the crew and change everything on the ship. Do you think it was the right call?
Yeah, he is thinking about the morale, and that's definitely you can't go, oh, by the way, everything is going bad for us because there's a saboteur on board. It's like that's it's not going to help. You're already in a situation where it's like we only have a couple hours and then we're dead anyway.
Yeah.
Riker has already given up, so it's like, why make things worse? So, yeah, the fact that they have a changeling on board, it sets up how do the changeling saboteur, do they have changelings on board a whole bunch of Starfleet ships as part of this grand strategy of theirs? But the fact that Vadic had information particular about Shaw tells me that they knew there was something about that ship that perhaps they were planning to use or be involved with. It's like, how much information do they have about Starfleet officers? Why was there a changeling specifically aboard that ship? Aboard that ship well before the events of what happened in the first episode happened. So it points at something bigger, which is what we know Worf and Rafi are trying to chase down, is that there is something bigger, something that is more devastating than the portal weapon. And the fact that there's changelings, secreted throughout Starfleet is problematic and bothersome. And I don't know how we're going to fix that. Or, but yeah, I think at the time, Riker's making the best decision. No, we don't need to be telling everybody that there's a changeling on board because it's only going to create more chaos. So I think that was a good idea.
Well, I agree as well. And it is very interesting. She has to go back to the captain, Captain Shaw, to find out more about changelings because she doesn't really know very much about them. And I just assumed, and I shouldn't have assumed this, but I just assumed that because she was a Borg at one time that she had all that information and knew. But apparently she's never encountered one. And so even the Borg, I don't know what their history with the Dominion is. But the point is that even the Borg, this young woman, well, yeah, well, let's just say in her lifetime, she's never encountered one. And I'm very surprised that she just of how little she knew about it. So she had to go to Shaw and ask him this question because he is the person who knows the ship better than anyone else. And he gives her excellent advice. You know, he tells her, well, first of all, you are a very talented leader and a great officer on the ship. And he says, and that's exactly the type of thing that a changeling might say to you. So just be careful. They wouldn't say, you know, a dick thing like, you know, I'm just some jerk from Chicago, or however he likes to keeps describing himself.
Yes.
When he's clearly just a bitter person who's gone through a lot of hell. And, you know, it's okay. You know, I don't really think he's a nobody. He's a captain of a Starfleet vessel, so I don't really feel like that you're an ordinary person after that. But certainly, and he survived, let's say, a Borg attack or an encounter and lived to tell the tale. So so it was very interesting to see that. But you know, she now is kind of knocking on his door and saying, "You're the only person I know who would even know about this. What do I do? How do I control them?" And he or at least find them. How do we can we track them? And he talks about the bucket thing, which I think you already mentioned, Julian. You have to find this bucket. And so she goes into the quarters of the transporter, I guess, transporter officer, and finds his body there. And I'm going out of sequence, but she does find the bucket and she ends up in the hallway. Julian, she ends up in the hallway front to front with the changeling. That is like the freakiest thing ever. He destroys the bucket, so she can't do the sample. Or at least I'm guessing she couldn't do it. And then she uses a, you know, she shoots him, and then it goes off into the wall somewhere. Wow, this thing, it's like I don't know how many steps ahead of them, and is relentless on attack from a changeling. It's really intense, Julian. They're out for blood. And I don't think they're going to stop, honestly. I think they're going to keep going with what they're doing. But, you know, Seven was also like, she worked the problem, didn't she?
Yeah.
What did you think about her approach to everything and how she did in that scenario?
I couldn't fault it for what I was seeing. It's been very interesting. You know, when she finds the bucket, it looks very similar to Odo's in a way. But I've seen some mentions online, like in the PGS community on Facebook. Dean Mikitich, he said to his recollection, Odo was the only one who needed the bucket to rest in because he'd been separated from the link for so long because he didn't know who he was, what he was, and so for him, he had the bucket for in his room, but that most other changelings didn't have to recharge in a bucket that they. I don't know for sure if that is in fact true, but it had me thinking. I was like, maybe that was just. It's something we know from DS9 about the bucket, so yeah, I would have to check that. So I don't know. I mean, Terry Matalas has been pretty good so far with how he calls back things from other shows, and you know, his knowledge of Trek minutia is pretty awesome. So I would have to check that out. But it was interesting that I can't tell if that changeling was firing deliberately at the bucket or if he was firing at Seven and she just happened to get the bucket in the way. So maybe she was just lucky.
Look, she certainly was lucky because she's never dealt with an entity like this before, and it's unlike any other entity I think she's ever had to deal with this, with so many unknowns. And knowing what you're going into, I'm really impressed with her brave, you know, how brave she was, because I would be terrified to go against this thing, not knowing what I'm up against. And they looked a little different. I don't remember if they looked like that in their liquid form or not. Like, I don't remember all the details. I do remember seeing them transform into a liquid form, but I don't remember what the liquid form looks like. So I wasn't sure if what we saw on the screen was pretty much what, you know, changelings look like in the liquid form. But what was really interesting about it is how she just continued no matter what. And she was really she didn't back down about it. I think I would have run, like, oh my gosh, it's here. Okay, I got to run. It was watching her the whole time. That's the part that's so disturbing, Julian.
Yeah, but I would not expect Seven of Nine to run. She's a very competent officer, a very competent individual, and I think after all those years in on Voyager, she has and beyond, she knows how to handle herself. Her work with the Fenris Rangers and all that. So I wasn't surprised at her, being as steady as she was. I think certainly it's a different effect that they're using. It looks almost like more, in a way, almost like a practical effect, the way that they're handling the changelings. And of course in DS9 they were using a post CGI type of effect, and it was kind of like an amber gelatinous, liquid type of thing that it would look like. And so this looks very different.
Okay, so it's not just me. It did look different. I wasn't sure whether it looked different because these are special changelings. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't quite sure whether it would look different depending upon the situation. But for all practical purposes, these are the changelings we know and love. So there is no confusion there, at least I think. And Beverly, who has been tracking these, what one of the science officers calls these bioelectric waves, notices that they're very similar to, they're kind of like a countdown, and she can predict when they're happening. And she likened it to like contractions, or is that what did she say contractions?
Yes. Yeah.
She likened it to contractions. And, I thought that was very interesting. And of course, I think all of us thought that, all of us had that in our minds anyway. But at no point, Julian, did I think that we were going to see something as miraculous as what we saw at the end. Even with the contractions reference, did you think that there would be a birth at the end of this episode?
I was busy with so much other stuff for the story that I wasn't trying to project ahead to what are we maybe going to see. The only time it maybe kind of crossed my mind was when they mentioned that there was some sort of bioelectric energy happening in the nebula. And I mean, that was like back in episode 2 when they first went in there, and they're mentioning that it's kind of strange, and of course Shaw's like, is there any more weird shit that's going to be thrown at me? So it crossed my mind, especially because there's phenomena out there that is even referred to as a stellar nursery, which is where a lot of stars are created, these stellar nurseries. And there's the word right there, nursery. Now this doesn't result in stars, but the fact that we've got some sort of bioelectric thing happening, we're in a nebula and we're out in space. And so it occurred to me then that something is going to happen that's going to be important to how our group escapes from this situation. But I didn't go beyond that. I just was open to it'll be interesting to see what happens, and it was very interesting to see what happened.
It was certainly very interesting, and I think that Beverly's involvement in it was very interesting to make that association, and it was fun to see that. And it comes to a point where they figure out that this bioelectric wave can be harnessed, but they need Shaw's help to go into engineering. One of my favorite parts. They go and they knock on his door and they say, hey, we need you to go into engineering. You're the only person who knows how to do this stuff. And so he goes in there with, of course, Seven, who he's kind of now, I maybe come to a bit more terms with working with her and understanding what her role might be in this. But we also kind of we also kind of see a situation where he tells her, or pretty much, that this is the point, or it might have been Seven who said it, who said, you know, right now as we're here, this is the point where we're most vulnerable, and
Who
someone
says it?
after us while we're in engineering. And of course it is, I should have put spoilers, but of course it is LaForge, the LaForge changeling, who isn't really her, and she figures it out. And I remember when we saw that scene between LaForge and between Seven, and I said, "There's a reason why they're showing us this." I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
she doesn't necessarily need to go and tell Seven how great she is. There is some
yeah.
clue as to why she's communicating with her this way, and I couldn't figure it out. And of course, now I realize it's because she called her Commander Seven and not Commander Hansen.
Yeah.
So I didn't get that clue. I should have listened a little bit carefully, because I knew right when I saw this, and I said, no, there's a reason for this scene. There's a payoff for the scene. And of course, the payoff, at least for me, was when we realized that there was a changeling whose comments were let them know that that was not really LaForge. But yeah, it looks like here where they're kind of finally seeing eye to eye, if you will, Julian, in hot wiring the warp core, so they can open up the I guess the flaps, if you will, and so the energy is pulled in.
Yeah.
Into the warp core. You know, I don't know whether it gets pulled in because it's from a higher pressure point to lower pressure point, or whatever it is, it gets sucked in, and they were able to utilize that energy and ride the wave, Julian, out of the nebula. And that last pulse, I guess, was where and I don't have a good picture of it, but because I was just going by what was on the internet, but that last pulse, they do kind of ride the wave out of the nebula, but then they see the on this let's say the screen, something very special happen. And of course that very special thing is I guess a birth of an alien species from that pool. Julian, you mentioned of life forms that are in the galaxy. So this is not a good photo of it, but it was beautiful. Julian, this thing was beautiful. Were you expecting to see something so beautiful in the episode?
No, I wasn't. But you mentioned earlier when you're talking about how the payoffs there. That's what's been one of the really delightful things about this series so far. We're 4 episodes in, and we have had wonderful, setups and payoffs that have worked really well, and it's just fun to see it happen, and fun to see it happen in a way that he's like, even if you had you knew LaForge had that conversation with her for a reason, but there was no way to know until it happens, and that's the best type of setup and payoff. Is that you see it and you're able to call back and go, oh, that was so smart. Shaw working with 7 of 9 was really cool. It makes me wonder though. It's like, where is the chief engineer for the starship?
Yes, they did say that they were too busy repairing things because they were exposed to the nebula and that there was damage, and also that the chief engineer did not understand all of the intricacies of that particular warp core because of the age of the vessel. And guys, if I'm wrong in the chat, I apologize, but I thought that's what they said. So I do not hold me to, don't hold me to it, but I believe that's what was said. Maybe somebody in the chat knows exactly if that was the case.
But in a lot of interviews, Todd Stashwick has talked about how I don't think it's actually, he said it's not actually spoken of in the show directly, but part of his internal backstory of why he chose 7 of 9 was because he knows she's a former Borg and that he's trying to work out his feelings about what happened at Wolf 359. The other thing is that based on her record, he realizes she's the type of officer that he needs to, be there on the bridge to make those, remarks when, they might need to be thinking of an alternative viewpoint.
Yeah, outside of the box.
Yeah, outside of the box. He chose her for a reason, and that's why she's there. And I think that's kind of cool, even if it's not something that ends up being actually discussed in the show via dialogue. It's there as a subtext, which is kind of nice. And I think it kind of would have been nice if we didn't know that and we got through the whole series and could look at it and go, oh, I see something there and I see something there. But Stashwick's been putting a lot of work into his character, and it's just awesome to see so far how he is, integrating in amongst this cast. He and all the other supporting players and Ed Spellier's playing, Jack Crusher, have all they're putting in top work for what they're doing, and they feel like part of this Trek universe, which is really enjoyable to watch.
It's so pleasurable. I really am enjoying it. But we're not just getting the performances, Julian, although it is part of the performance. It's not just the performances for me. What I've noticed is that we're also getting something that I always used to enjoy about Star Trek, were sort of these insights where we see a part where I think it's Riker. I think it may not be Riker. Maybe it was Picard who says, "You're only ever as good as those around you. And if we all work together, we will get through this." I'm paraphrasing, guys. If we all work together, we will get through this. And I thought to myself, sometimes that's what people just need to hear sometimes, no matter what. And I thought that was so important to show in the episode, that even though they don't know this crew, they can still kind of come together and say things like that. And that has so much brevity and meaning, because it shows that he believes in the crew. And that's so important for the crew to have that level of trust with the senior officers. So I really loved that we saw that. The other thing too, that I thought was very interesting, is that in one of the scenes towards the end, Julian, because we only have an hour to talk about this, towards the end, we see this very interesting scene where, and of course, the episode starts off with this, where, here it is, where, of course, Picard is in the bar and he's talking to everybody. And as he's about to eat his haddock or whatever it is,
his haddock,
someone interrupts it and says, "Hey, do you ever regret not having your own family and being on the starship?" And of course, it's Jake. And he doesn't know this is his son. And throughout the entire narrative, we've heard that he's kind of wanted to stay away from Jean-Luc and, not necessarily have anything to do with him, only to find out. I don't know whether Jean-Luc realizes it was him or whether we're the omniscient observer and we realize it was Jake.
I've seen some discussion about that. Some people are like, does he really know or does he not? And I choose to believe that he does make the realization. He remembers who it was. All the things, when they're having their earlier conversation about, why didn't you come seek me out? And then he starts talking about the whole thing in the shuttlecraft with his, namesake. Yeah, with Jack, and so, and he's like he's heard. Have you heard this? Did Beverly tell you? Did your mother tell you this? And so, I think yes, he's able to pull together. That he remembers. Picard is he is a top. He's on top of it. He remembers this. That's why he is where he is. That's why he's Admiral Picard, and he remembers that conversation, and it was like, that was you, wasn't it?
Okay. Okay. And,
Yeah.
it certainly, I'm sure he would remember someone asking him something so incredibly specific. And of course, Jack is a very striking young man. If I saw him, I'm just saying personally, I would remember this guy. I wouldn't be like, I don't remember him. No, I'm going to remember him. He's kind of a young, attractive person. But what's even more interesting about this, Julian, is the fact that right when it seems like there's like this detente to the episode, right? Kind of like an easement. They got through that tough time. Jack is not at a detente state, is he? In fact, he's at a very terrified state because he's being haunted by these visions that look terrifying. They look very red, very intense, with the door opening, the saying, "Find me together soon." It's horrible. Julian, is he ever going to tell anybody about this?
He better. He's got to, but of course, for the sake of story, it's probably going to be at the last moment type of a thing. But yes, the visions that he's having of, cloudy, murky, red, almost explosion type of, things with voices echoing. It seems like some sort of a destruction, and it's certainly not welcoming. It's not warm. It looks bad, and the fact that we really don't know what it is makes it even worse, and leads us to believe that it's got to have something to do with why they're trying to get him. So.
Well, it's keeping him up at night, Julian. We can see here, this is not the best photo of, it's just a simple screen shot that someone did, but I just included it just so you could have a reference of it. And it looked terrifying. It looked like it was growing on the walls in the ship. And you could also hear Seven of Nine's voice in the vision, which I don't know why her voice is in the vision, Julian. It's very strange to me, but I guess we'll find out why. But he is terrified and he can't get any sleep. And even on board the ship, there's something else going on that he's been hiding from everybody. Yeah, I thought it looked like Vecna from Stranger Things 2, Darth Plato. When we were watching the show live the other night, Julian and I said it reminded me of Stranger Things. Some of the visualization, which is fine. It can look like that. It really surprised me, but it is terrifying. And it doesn't look like he can escape it, Julian. Even with everybody around them, it feels like it's penetrating the ship, almost penetrating his very being. So it has its grip on him and it's not letting go. Like, it's not showing any kind of detachment. So I'm really scared for him. But overall, Julian, how would you rate this episode?
Oh, it was tops. If we're gonna go, well, each episode in this season has just gotten better and better because the story continues to give us more information and continue the mystery at the same time. And it's not necessarily starting new mysteries. They're the same ones. It's giving us a little bit more information each time, but we're still not able to make that total connection, which, I find good. We've got, 6 more episodes to go.
6 more 2 a.m. Meetings.
At 2:30, whatever, 2:15.
And but I've been enjoying it. And I did just want to thank everybody here for tuning in tonight. Tom Jr. Jackson, thank you for moderating tonight. My collaborator, we are all good people, a moderator for the channel. Julian, thank you for joining me tonight. And where can people find you, Julian, before we wrap up?
They can find me right here on the PGS Treks, and they can find me on Facebook, Julian Mushkin, especially if you want to leave a message like in the PGS Facebook page. So that's where you can find me.
Excellent. And guys, you can always find me right here on the Burnettwork, and as well as on my YouTube channel, Positive Fandom. I also stream with Lorraine Cruel and the 1/6 Scale Man Network. You can find me on any one of those locations. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in for the live stream, for the live watch party, and for tonight. I've got to run because I need to get ready for the next show, which is Midnight Musings, which I believe is happening in 15 minutes. But regardless of if it happens or not, I just want to thank everybody out there for the support of the channel. Julian, of course, thank you so much for joining me again to do this show.
I love it.
Guys, no matter where you are, live long and prosper. But remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.